Hi guys, I like to make stuff, and today I made a diorama. I started with a piece of XPS insulation foam. This stuff is sold at hardware stores. Home Depot and Lowe's have it, and that is going to be my base for the diorama. Now, to get an idea of where I wanted the vehicles, the tank and the 2.5-ton cargo truck, I put them on the diorama and drew some lines, although I really didn't know what was happening, so I scrapped the idea of drawing lines on the foam and decided to make a plan on a scrap sheet of paper I had. After I had drawn my plan, I put that sketch onto the block of foam using a permanent marker, and once I was happy with that, I began to carve the bricks, or the cobblestone street. So my method for this is I take a ruler, and then I go ahead with a hobby knife, or a box cutter as I'm using here. I'll get a better view of that in a moment of what I'm doing. So I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing now, but I'll initially score the foam using the box cutter, then come back using the same box cutter and add a few, add the separations in between the bricks and mark out each individual brick. Then I'll go ahead with a spare razor blade and widen the bricks. And I'll show you that technique in a moment here. So I went ahead with the hobby blade and then marked each individual brick. And after that, I take a spare razor blade, just a dull razor blade, and gently wiggle it in between the brick gaps to widen them and make them look like they're actual bricks, or cobblestones, whatever you want to call it. And then taking a small spatula tool I have lying around, I go ahead and widen the spaces in between each brick. Now this process took a very long time, as I was making the whole cobblestone road. And one thing I forgot to mention is that after scoring and widening all the bricks, I went ahead with a small rock just to add some texture. Just by pressing that down into the foam, you can add a lot of nice texture. So that gave the bricks a lot more realism and variation. You can also remove some bricks if you want to add another level of realism, because in real life it's a war zone. There would be bricks being removed, or bricks that would have been removed accidentally flying off and blowing up. And remove that part, remove that part, remove that part, Andrew. And I'm just repeating the same process over and over again. After that was done, I was very, very happy to be done carving bricks, and I went on to making the sidewalk. Now for the sidewalk, I'm using 1mm polystyrene, or styrene sheets. I just bought this stuff at Hobby Lobby. It's kind of expensive, so I only recommend buying a little bit of it, but it does work very well, and I was able to carve the curve in it to make a sidewalk. Now to make a shell crater, I just marked the area where I wanted it with a Sharpie, and then angled and cut out the section with a hobby blade. I made sure to do this at an angle because the deeper part of the shell would be near the center, and it would get I also cut out the sections where the shell would have impacted the sidewalk. Then using some, I believe it was quarter or half inch, I can't remember, foam, I'll put a link to that in the description. What I'm doing with it is just scoring it, pretty much the same method as I had done before with a knife, and then going along adding some vertical cuts to make the width of the bricks, and then I go along with a hot wire foam cutter and gently remove the bit of foam behind the bricks. This method isn't necessarily ideal. If you have a foam cutter that can cut foam at an exact right angle, I recommend using that instead, but it worked alright for me. And then what I did was I took some joint compound or plaster compound, whatever you want to call it. This stuff goes on pink, it dries white, at least the brand I'm using. It doesn't really matter what brand you're using though, they all work the same. But I'm just slather that on and then place the bricks or push them into the wet compound. After I pushed the bricks in, I sprinkled a bit of dirt and then repeated the process over the entire areas that I wanted to add the rubble. And I found that it was easier just to dump all the bricks on top of the diorama instead of individually adding them brick by brick. It also added some randomization. And I just repeated the same process as before. The dirt really helps to add the look of broken bricks and rubble and dirt, so I really recommend adding that. And then to glue it down, I used a mixture of water, a few drops of dish soap, and some Mod Podge mat. The dish soap helps to break up the surface tension because you want it to be able to flow in between all the individual pieces of dirt and to help also glue the bricks down in place. Now this method I found worked really well, and I was able to have a pretty rock solid mass of dirt, plaster, and foam when I was done. Now to make the building, I took the same half-inch foam I had used earlier for the bricks, and I just carved and cut a house into it. Now you'll know most of my house is blown up, as the scene I'm making is from a picture I found where the building is really blown up in the background and there's just rubble and destruction everywhere. So I tried to replicate that. I just cut out the door with my knife, and I did the same for the two windows. And there's a finished house. Then I went ahead and carved the bricks in it using the same method I had done for the street, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. It's just the exact same method. After that was done, I made sure everything fit onto the sidewalk, and I also added a few windowsills using the 1mm polystyrene I had done earlier, windowsills and door frames. Then to make the stucco or plaster look, how they used to cover it up back in the day, they used to put plaster over the top of the bricks, so to replicate that I went ahead with some joint compound and put that over the areas where the plaster would still be intact and where it wouldn't have gotten blown off. Now I left it off the bricks that would be exposed, so I'll paint those on later. And then I replicated the same rubble that I had done on the other side of the diorama in front of the house. all dry and all hard, I went on to the painting. Now to start the painting, I used a black paint just to bring all the colors together. You want to have a surface that will easily be paintable, and I didn't want to have too many different colors going on, so I was like, okay, I'll just paint the whole thing black and start from scratch. So I covered the whole diorama in that to unify it all. Then after the black paint had dried, I went over with a mixture of chocolate brown and the same color black we had used earlier to paint the dirt. Now, I'm only doing this in the areas that there would be dirt, so he'd have a little bit of overspray because we're going to go ahead and touch it up later on, but this is just to get the basic idea that there is dirt down there, and just to outline the areas that we want to have painted brown. Now I forgot to film the process I used to paint the road. It's just just a light gray, and then I moved on to paint the house using a mixture of yellow and white. I wanted to have a pale yellow, not really a bright yellow, just something that would have been toned down to fit in with the rest of the diorama, the gray and gloomy aspect of it. So I mixed a bit of white in with the yellow paint to achieve that, and I just painted the house using that color. You may have to do it in multiple coats. The black paint tends to not do well with lighter colors, so I had to paint a few coats. And I painted the bricks using a red and brown mixture. You can also add a little bit of black in there if you want. And I individually painted each brick using this. Then over top of the gray paint I had painted earlier on the road, I used my typical black wash. I'm not going to go into detail into this. I do this every model and diorama I have. I use this wash, just black paint, water, and a few drops of floor polish, and I just spread that and wiped it off. Then I went ahead with the sidewalk. I painted that using this cream color I had lying around, and then I individually painted the rocks. This helps to add some variation. You don't want to have everything being the same color. It wasn't really necessary though, actually. Now that I think about it, couldn't really tell. And here's the finished diorama. Now this diorama is, I'm just going to say it's really not complete. You'll notice there's a lot of stuff that's really not done. To be honest, the only reason I stopped working on it was because I got tired of it. I really didn't want to work on it anymore. I kind of tackled something too big, if you know what I mean. That's also the reason this video took so long to get out. It's because I was just really tired of working on it. You'll notice that there are a few areas that haven't even been painted correctly. There's a lot of overspray and not everything matches. The colors aren't working together, so I'm just gonna call it good for now. I'll definitely come back and do a video on me updating it and repainting it and everything. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. You can subscribe if you want to. If you don't subscribe, I really do hope you enjoy the videos. Stay tuned for next time, and I'll see you. Happy modeling.